Hi, and in this video it's sort of a continuation from my recruitment ones, and this is very much about side issues to do with raiding, which can make it more difficult to recruit, especially into mythic guilds. However, I do note from a comment I had that it's also very difficult to recruit into heroic guilds. In fact, you could argue harder to recruit into heroic guilds because the sort of people who've got the dedication and gear to actually sort of do heroic, well, why wouldn't they just do a pug in a weekend with a load of mythic raiders and their alts who are trying to get Titan Forged gear? And, so it can be incredibly difficult to get a heroic guild. But in this video, what I want to talk about are the side issues, the things that make people who would ordinarily be quite keen raiders less inclined to raid, and therefore you restrict the pool of potential raiders altogether. I wasn't going to do this one just yet because right at the moment, this is a very sore point for me. I am extremely salty. But then I saw a piece of news that just drove me over the edge. So there is going to be a rant element to this one, which I wasn't originally going to do. It was going to be all objective and, your journalistic distance from afar and all the rest of it. But screw that, I'm annoyed. So I'm going to start off with some of the initial ones that I'm not really having a go at Blizzard for, but they are side issues. They are the sort of things that make people disinclined to raiding. So we start off with the first one, which is consumables. Of course, if you're going to do any sort of serious raiding, you ought to have your potions and you ought to have your flasks and your consumable food. Maybe runes, depends on the level there. Sometimes in most guilds, you'll just be expected to rune. When you know you've sort of got the strategy down, you just need to push the DPS. Vantus runes as well. Maybe a guild supplies those. Maybe you supply them yourself. Once a week thing. But it is another consumable. The last few expansions, we seem to have got these new consumables. I mean, back in vanilla, in early days of raiding, you took very few consumables at all. You might take a health or a mana pot, and you might or might not use it. And then, TBC flasks became much more the norm. They existed in vanilla and sometimes you used them on a tough boss, but it wasn't that common. Now it's very common, so you're expected to use multiple flasks. And particularly hitting Legion, I've mentioned this before, because of course of the high consumable costs of these flasks and potions. Especially now you have the two-tier system, so if you are someone, for example, like me, who needs to use the more expensive old war pots because that's still best in most situations. And then you've got someone for whom, well, do you know what? The much cheaper prolonged power pots are actually BIS for them. So they get to use those as well. It's a bit like, ooh, that's a bit annoying. But just the expensive, I mean, it's at the start of the expansion, it was really bad. And you could argue, although it's got a lot better since, and it has got a lot better, and it's going to continue to get better. Blizzard are aware of it and they're putting things in place. The fact that it was so bad at the start of the expansion potentially already put off a lot of raiders, and it's very difficult to get those back. It's one of those things. It's very quick and easy to lose people's interest in raiding. Not so easy to get it back again, even if you improve the situation that caused them to turn away from it in the first place. Next thing is we have varying population realms. So it was understandable why we needed realms in the early days of WoW, because it was in the relatively early days of MMOs. It was by no means the first, but it was the first, you could argue, on the big crest of a surge in popularity of them, even though there were very famous titles before it. And you understood why we needed realms. We can't have that many people all on sort of one server, so you create this thing. But now, do we really need that? Because you now have a situation where people feel trapped on a low population realm. They find it very difficult to recruit to their guilds because there's a very small pool of potential recruits on that realm. And to get other people to go to that realm, I'm not so bothered myself. I don't really play much. But a lot of people who are interested in the economy and aren't very self-sufficient will want to go to a high population realm. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the economy. They'll be able to buy and sell what they need. Secondly, is if it doesn't work out with that guild and they go to a high population realm, there's a much better chance there are other guilds they could potentially join without having to pay for another server transfer. Low population realm, not much chance. There's usually like one guild that's all right on it, and maybe a couple if you're lucky. And again, do we need it? Do we need that technology? Are realms even relevant anymore? Or is it, as some people have suggested, just a money-making scheme so that Blizzard can charge us for transfers, and I'm going to come on to that because that's part of my rant. The other thing is alts for split raids. Now, split raids are a thorny issue at the moment. Most guilds don't do split raids, of course. My guild doesn't do split raids. But it is becoming an increasing fact that if you want to be really pushing it in the Mythic, and it is no longer the preserve of the hardcore raider, that a lot of guilds, even semi-hardcore guilds, do split raids. And that means you need an alt that's geared up for it. And some people don't like doing that. They especially don't like doing it. Like, I was in a guild at the start of the expansion where this was going to be a thing, and I had to fit around work, leveling up my main character extremely quickly, getting it geared up, ready for raiding to start, as well as another alt. You know, I had another character who I had to level up and gear up. And the thing is, there were so many ways to gear up in Legion especially, which in many ways is a positive thing. But what it meant was every time I spent time on my alt, I was thinking, I'm weakening or potentially weakening my main character. But I had to get these two characters up. And that's a lot of pressure, and it takes up a lot of time. That can put a lot of people off. In fact, there are people who will specifically not join a guild that does split raids. Now, again, that's not something we can really bash Blizzard about. Although, you know, I've heard people come up with ideas for... Blizzard would love to dissuade it themselves. They're not in favour of it. No one is in favour of it. Even top guilds would rather not do it, I am sure. I can't speak for the very top guilds, the hardcore players, but I'm pretty sure they'd be secretly pretty pleased if all they needed alts for was for different classes to mix in for certain fights where their own main class was not that great. As used to be the case. But the fact that we now have these split raids, it's very difficult to come up with an elegant system for doing away with them. And Blizzard would be delighted if someone could come up with it. And I sometimes hear ideas, oh, if they did this and they did that. But usually it either makes the situation worse or there's some other way to abuse it. Because what mustn't be the case is you don't want a situation where some hardcore players can abuse the hell out of the system either. It just needs, you know, so that's something we can't really blame Blizzard for. Then there's Titan forging. This all again adds to the time you feel you have to do it. So the fact, Blizzard say it as if it's a good thing. For a lot of casual players, I have to point this out. And I know the majority of players are casual players, and this is a great system. So I'm not... You know, some of these things I'm talking about, I'm not talking about them as if they're just straight up bad for the game and should be destroyed. I'm just trying to explain how they put extra pressures on Mythic Raiders to stop them doing Mythic Raiding. So what's all this about? I mean, I've sort of touched on this in the past as well. So you have a situation where your Mythic Raiders are doing their normal stuff in Guild, and then at the weekend they're pugging like normal. Maybe they'll do Heroic again so they can use their coins again on certain bosses because of the possibility. Even LFR. I'm not saying using the coins in LFR, but going to LFR, because who's to say that this week we're not going to be the ones who get an LFR 925 item level trinket with a socket, especially the trinket we really want. Wow, yeah, we've seen the meme. Well, it's not a meme, it's happened. Of course it's going to happen. Enough players do it. You know, it's one end of the bell curve. Not many's going to get it. The possibility that it exists mean you're silly not to do it. And also has a knock-on effect. This actually has a knock-on effect for casual players, because I've talked about this before. I'm not saying it's definitely the case, but it's the sort of thing that could be the case. So, because you've got all these Mythic Raiders who are doing all these pugs, it's driving up the item level requirement to even get into these raids. So it's now like, oh yeah, to get into this raid, you need like 20 item levels more than the best gear baseline that's going to drop. Because actually, do you know what? It could Titan Forge. And, you know, that might be an upgrade for even people that are 900 item level or more. It's potentially freezing out some of the lower geared, more casual players for whom that would normally be their stomping grounds. And then, and again, it's extra time. It's extra things people sort of feel compelled to do. Then we come to the AP grind, of course. How could we forget the AP grind? So the AP grind is another thing that is coming up. We have had people drop out of our guild just because of that. Now, we know in a system, in guilds, often guild messages when you're reading about them, recruitment, things like that, they'll say, we don't like raid logs. We don't like the sort of people that just log on for raids and then log off again. Sure, we don't. We want it to be a nice social experience. But I don't think, I can't swear to this, I've played this game for a long time, but I don't think I've ever been in a guild, a raiding guild, where there weren't at least a few people who did just that. They logged on for raids, and then they logged off. Occasionally they might come on for a few hours that weren't raid times for like farming some shit. And that was about it. So guilds often, I'm not saying all guilds, a lot of guilds have these sort of players. And the fact that those players now are just going, it's not worth it, means again we're losing a pool of potentially good raiders, or actually good raiders, because I know that it's hit my guild, it's continuing to hit my guild. The fact that there's another AP grind, doesn't matter that Blizzard are saying, oh, it's not going to be as bad. It's coming. There's another AP grind coming. And that is just causing people to stop playing. People are saying, I am not playing in 7.2. Reducing it still further. And then we come on to the biggest one of all, and the one I want to have a real rant about before I sort of finish this off, because I don't want it to go on forever. And it's this. One of the biggest barriers when I'm recruiting, or when anyone is recruiting, you, on certain realms, you sort of get away, like, you know, on the EU, like your likes of Kazakh and Ravencrest and Silvermoon, they've usually got quite a lot of guilds. So it's quite common when you're looking at people that are advertising themselves as looking for a guild, they'll sort of say they're not looking for a realm transfer because they sort of know there's enough guilds on that realm. They don't need to transfer in most cases. And of course, there's a cost to it. But on other realms, you like on the realm I'm at, I know that I'm going to have to get the majority of my recruits from another realm. So I have to go looking around. And I've got to persuade them that my guild is worth them spending money on. Now, in terms of other things like faction, for example, if you have to transfer faction as well, yes, there's an extra cost with that. Some people, fair enough, don't want to play as the other faction. Like, I prefer to play as Alliance. I have played Horde. I will play it if I have to. I'd prefer to play Alliance. But some players just won't play the other faction. They either just won't play Horde or they won't play Alliance. And that's fair enough. That's a different thing. But the fact that this exists and with the extra cost to it makes it more difficult. So straight away, you're asking this person to spend money to transfer to your realm. Bit of a risk that they're actually outlaying what is more than the cost of a monthly, or maybe even two monthly subscriptions. Then if they're going to faction change at all, it goes right up. Like, for example, I can only give it in the currency that I use, British pounds. It costs £17 to transfer realm. Okay. Which is about double what I spend on my subscription. It's the equivalent of like a 2 months worth of subscription, let's say. Now, if I wanted to faction change as well, that's £39. That's more than double just for the faction change. And now, this is very important. This service, I'm not saying they shouldn't charge anything for it. I'm not saying it doesn't cost them anything because they have to put systems in place. But those systems are automated. So although there is a cost to having set them up and maintaining them, it's not very expensive. They could easily do this for less. Now, here is the thing. It has just been announced today, and this is for the EU, and I know a lot of people watch this from the US, and it won't affect you guys, but this is from the EU. They're putting up the price of paid services very soon, round about when we'd be expecting 7.2 to come out. So, in pounds terms, remember what I said? Character transfer was, or is currently £17, going to go up to £19. So it's a couple of quid more expensive now. Now, if they want to do a transfer and faction change, that was £39. It's now going to be £46. That's a 15% increase on what is an automated system. Now, can you imagine with so many more players being Horde? Again, this is where my personal salt comes into it. I feel this was going to affect a lot of people, not just me. But this is why I didn't want to do it right now, because this is obviously, I'm not being in the slightest bit objective here. This is personal. I'm now going to, if I have to, and the majority of players I have to approach are Horde players. In a few weeks' time, if we're still, if I'm still able to be recruiting, I'm going to have to say, yeah, can you come here? It's going to cost you £46 per character. Per character. So if they have alts, and a lot of Mythic Raiders do, I do for professions, if nothing else, you're asking them to pay £46 per character. So to transfer to my guild, I'm potentially asking them to pay out more than they do in a full year on subscriptions for just a small number of characters. Now, What is there something Blizzard can do about this? Yes, I actually do think there is something Blizzard. And I'm not just going to go the simple, don't charge as much, just cover your expenses, be nice. They're not a charity, they are a business. I understand that. But here's the thing, right? World of Warcraft is one of the very few, it may even be the only one now, but I'm not an expert on this, I can't say. But it's certainly one of the very few subscription-based MMOs. So many MMOs have like a free-to-play model. We know it's not free-to-play, but it has that sort of model to it. This one doesn't. But I do feel they should start giving something for that subscription. What if, with the subscription, I've said this before, but I really do think they should be doing this. Each month with the subscription, you've got so many credits to spend on this online store, which remember doesn't have like pay to win type items, but you know, for the mounts and stuff and the realm transfers, so many credits. And then someone who'd played for say 6 months, something like that, would be able to have enough credits for a transfer, including a faction transfer. And someone who'd been on the same realm for a couple of years would actually have enough to transfer several characters. That way it would ease the pressure on raiding guilds, because I think Blizzard indirectly and directly are putting a lot of extra pressure on Mythic Raiders, and there are things they could do about it, and I don't think they are doing. And I think this is a huge barrier. The actual cost is a huge barrier. And when you're now going to raise the price 15%, that is going to make it ridiculously difficult to get people to faction transfer now and raid, or even just realm transfer. And I just think at the moment it was really weird. Like in WoD, all the talk was about it killing raiding because there wasn't enough to do. Now all the talk is it's killing raiding because there's so many pressures that Blizzard are putting on raiders. There's so many things they're telling them to do that have got nothing to do with raiding. Nothing to do with raiding. But anyway, I could go on forever about this. I'm going to leave it at that. Those are my side issues that put pressure on raiders to, you know, not want to raid and therefore reduce the pool of players. Some of it is indirect. Some of it I can't fault Blizzard for. There isn't. I can't think of a better system to deal with it. But some of the things Blizzard could definitely do something about. And I think they should, in the interest of maintaining the people that people aspire to be within the game. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope you found it interesting as always. I hope you'll forgive my little rant there. I don't do them that often. And if you did enjoy it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.